Hi, Devin. Hi, Pam. Hi, Floyd. Hi, Artie.
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Did I miss
Hi.
it?
Yeah, and let's see. All right, I think we have the technology all squared away. We did a mic check. Everyone's working, so we'll just go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for joining us on this video conference part of the Welaunee Charrette. As you are aware, and many of you have been on here before, but I think there's a few new faces. This is one part of a two-part charrette that we have going on right now. The other part is a virtual workshop. The link is online, the same place where you registered for this. That'll include a series of videos that provide some context and then the ability to go in and comment directly on the objective and policies that are part of the current version of the master plan. We do anticipate doing an in-person kind of following CDC guidance at the time, kind of follow up to this round of charrettes in the future. So please keep a watch on the website, and we'll send out another planning department email subscription service link at the time that we launch those. So there should be some information coming out on that. Today we are looking primarily at the map of Welaunee, kind of the idea being that each of the objective and policies that make up the master plan would eventually result in something that is tangible on the ground. We can talk about any topic that you want to talk about today, but that's why we have the map kind of pinned, so hopefully everyone can see that. There are a couple different options for how you view things in WebEx. At the top right corner, there should be an option between two different active speaker views and the grid view. And if you do the active speaker view, you should be able to see the map that Floyd has pinned. I'm going to ask one of our tech support people if they could have Jerry and Scott made panelists, because they're right now showing up in the attendees list. And then we'll get going. But at this point, I'll actually just hand it over to Floyd and Devin to lead the charrette. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Artie. Good morning, everyone. Good to see so many folks again. And welcome to our new folks. Gary, Kate, Laura, you're the new ones to the party on this one. So welcome. Thanks for coming. Just to kind of set the stage and get it set up for you of what we've done with the others the first time we've been here. I just want to ask Floyd if he'll go around and kind of show the boundaries of the map so everybody's familiar exactly with where we're at. And then from there, we'll open it up for discussion about anything anyone wants to talk about. And one more question before Floyd does that. Is everybody seeing the map right now? Okay, awesome. Thank you. And I'll be watching all the screens on my screen. So if you do have a question and you don't feel like you can jump into the conversation, if you just kind of make a motion with your hand, I'll acknowledge you and get you into the conversation. I think we've been pretty good at that so far. Would you guys agree, Mike, Pam, anyone that's been on before? Okay, awesome.
Yeah, that works. I just don't have a camera today for some reason. Same machine, same everything, but the camera's not there. I don't know.
Okay, Scott, if you end up having an issue, there is a button within it that you can do a raise hand virtually, and we should be able to see that as well.
Okay, I will do it.
I think we may have the same situation with Jerry Lindsay. We're not able to make her a panelist or them a panelist, but they may be able to do the raise hand feature as well. Okay, well, we won't be able to hear them if they're not a panelist though, correct, Artie?
Right, so I've unmuted Jerry.
Okay, awesome.
Can you hear us, Jerry?
I hope so.
Okay, yes, I can hear you. So thank you.
All right, with that, Floyd, I'm going to kick it over to you. Floyd, you want to talk about location, where we're at, kind of boundaries?
Sure, man, sure. Yeah, can everybody see my finger on the map? Okay. See my hand?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, this black boundary here, that's pretty much the property boundary around the parcel that we're talking about, all the way around here. Give you context, this is Roberts Road up here. This kind of brown triangle here is Roberts and Mumford School up here. This is Centerville. This is Buckhead down here. This here, right here, this is I-10. Kind of the green hatch that I drew in while you guys are getting started. That's the Miccosukee Greenway. This is the north end. I-10. This is kind of Thornton Road, and keep on going down into town. And on the map itself, basically, this is something that we do in our shop. When folks come in all the time and say, "Hey, I've got 1 acre, 2 acres, 50 acres, a couple thousand acres, whatever," they want some assistance and what their options are with their property, what they can do, what they can't do, that kind of stuff. And so this is a service we provide all the time, and we treat this no differently. And so the first thing we did, really just high level, just kind of identify some of the floodplain, the wetlands, stuff like that. And that's what this blue-green area is here. Kind of see here, these are all the flood zones, some of the low areas that you absolutely can't do anything in, really. And said, okay, let's just get those marked on there. The Greenways Master Plan, just calling out for, perimeter greenway around the parcel. And so we said, well, let's just identify that on there. And then we know that there's going to be some kind of north-south connection. That's what these little dark dashed lines are, potential road circulation. They're no way at all set in stone and said that we have to have this many or this is where they have to go. It just kind of makes sense to say, okay, there's probably something generally across an I-10 down here. There's probably something generally north-south. And it makes sense to have something going kind of like east-west, and said, okay, so we just threw something there real conceptual, saying, we probably cross it somewhere where there's maybe an existing dirt road or something like that. And then what's left is the color hatches. You got the purple, kind of the tan, and kind of the orange. And these are more of the higher, drier areas. Like, okay, if you do something in these on this property, it would have to generally be limited to these areas. Now, granted, it doesn't mean that 100% of these areas should be, wiped out, developed, or anything like that. There would be additional environmental features, habitats, other things like that that would have to be identified, set aside, also set aside, things like that, as the process moves along. But that's generally kind of how we got to where we are with this map today.
Thanks, Floyd. One of the things I wanted to say just before we get too far into it is, in the previous meetings, there's been a lot of topics that we've discussed, and those are not off the table to discuss again. If anyone wants to discuss them, we can. But just to kind of give folks an idea of what those topics are, and this isn't a comprehensive list, but I'm going to hit as many as I can remember off the top of my head. We've talked about regional stormwater facilities. We've talked about schools and school concurrency. We've had conversations around the canopy coverage and the urban forest of the area. We've talked about roadway connections and roadway networks. We've talked about the type of development that could possibly be in this. So everything's been on the table. We've talked about habitats, natural habitats, and corridors for wildlife. So we've really had a wide gamut of things that we've been talking about over the first 5. I think this is our now 6th charrette. So anything like that, if anybody wants to kick off the conversation or jump in, feel free to go ahead and bring up any concerns you may have or anything you want more answers about. And if you probably are muted right now, so if you're trying to say something, you'd have to unmute before you can speak.
Is there anyone else here besides Keep It Rural?
A lot of feedback from your microphone.
I'm not sure if Jerry or Kate are from Keep It Rural, but Jerry does have their hand raised.
And I don't think that I can actually hear them already when they speak.
Can you hear us, Jerry? They sound kind of muffled.
Yeah, I can't make out anything anyone's saying if they're speaking.
It sounds like somebody's microphone's waving around in the wind or bouncing around in a shirt pocket or something.
If Jerry wants to put their comment into the chat function, they could put it in the chat function. I could read it out.
That's true. You have the capability of doing that, Jerry.
I don't have a camera, so.
Oh, we can use my camera here.
Okay.
I'm gonna text
Want to get anything, Artie?
see if she's the one whose microphone is being so weird.
Say that again.
This is Laura. I'm going to text Jerry Lindsay and see if she's got the weird microphone sounds.
Pam's shut hers down,
It's just not.
but we're going to use her camera and my microphone, I guess. I don't think my microphone's being weird, but there's.
Oh, that was quiet.
It cleared up really well now. Whatever happened, now we got clear audio.
So I think it is
Jerry.
Jerry's microphone. I'm not sure why they are not able to speak.
And we can't bring them in as a panelist? That's not possible?
No, it seems to not allow us to do that. I'm not sure why. I think.
Yeah, we had to mute Jerry's microphone already. We had our tech support do that, and that is what the noise was in the background, was that microphone.
Jerry.
Okay.
Oh, so it wasn't me?
I don't know.
Yours
Do you
was
want
down there
to?
too.
Turn me back on.
Do you want to try to rejoin the meeting, Jerry, and see if we can have more luck that time?
So once so there's no one else here but Keep It Rural. Is that true?
I'm not sure if Kate is from Keep It Rural.
No, Kate's
They are
not.
from Trust for Public Land.
Trust for Public Lands, Gary Hunter.
Gary
So I don't know if Kate has anything that she wants to add.
Oh, he's not from Keep It Rural.
Yeah, Kate, is there anything while we're going through this that you want to talk about, or anything? Why you wanted to join the shred today, at least?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, my interest is I'm interested in the entire plan for what's going to happen here, but specifically the Greenway and how any development here is going to affect the Greenway and crossings and access for pedestrians and others, because we actually, that was a project of the Trust for Public Land 25 years ago. We conceived of that Greenway and did the project to buy the land and turn it over to the city and county. So I'm interested in how any development here is going to affect that, and in additional public access for trails and recreation. So
Great.
thanks.
Do you want me to jump on that, Devin?
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you want to give an update on any of the trail systems or talk about any of that?
Yeah, but as far as the trails on Miccosukee Greenway as they stand now, that's what you're asking about, the impact of Miccosukee Greenway, right, Kate?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Basically, for example, these two coming in here, I think they talked about having access points here. I believe at this point there would be no crossing here. The Greenway's on the east side of the road or south side of the road, however you look at it. And so the trails on this side here, there would be a crossing, here that I think that's already negotiated and agreed back in the day at the point at Miles Johnson. And that's something that probably Gary or Robert could probably speak to. But I think this is one that's already been pre-negotiated. There'd be a crossing that continued through here and then create that intersection here. But I believe up here would just be connection points just to get to Miccosukee, but they wouldn't continue across the Greenway.
Okay.
Well, the Keep It Rural has, we've talked about greenways and open space a lot here. And I mean, even from the beginning, we've talked about a real canopy instead of a 100-foot buffer, of widening that to something that can actually support a canopy along Centerville and basically continuing a lot of that greenway around the entire perimeter. And you can't see me waving my finger around the perimeter,
He's
but I
waving
am.
his finger around.
So, but that was something, I think we've discussed this in one of the previous things, is why it hadn't gotten mentioned quite so much, but making the emerald necklace sort of boundary around the outside edge of that property is one of the things we'd like to see.
Yeah, actually, Kate, if you give us your email address, Keep It Rural has provided a sort of full-fledged proposal with a map to staff and commissioners. I mean, it's just, we aren't really sure how to implement it. We're looking for ways of putting it into the master plan, but we would love any sort of input from you guys on it, so we can send that to you. It's our document. It's not an official document. It's from Keep It Rural, but it includes buffers. I'll help Floyd draw it in here. Here, you ready, Floyd? So
Yeah,
the buffer along Miccosukee on the side that you did it, and then let's go over to Centerville. It's also a buffer all along Centerville to make it bigger, so that the trail that Blueprint is trying to build actually has a place to be. So at the moment, it's just a trail. We're trying to build a greenway.
Sure.
And then, okay, so now go down to Buckhead for a minute. So it includes, no, not right at the edge. So capture, it's at the edge of the open
Wetland,
space
just-
there, the wetlands. Go north, move your,
Yeah, right about where the
capture
green
that, right,
ends.
come along the end of that. And then we brought it all the way over to the purple. This is just proposal, guys, all the way over to purple, bring it down. And that's a buffer system, both protecting the established open space that needs protection for Buckhead. And then the really big one, let's go up to the northeast corner. So in the north, come back down, look at the edge, the southern edge of the open space there. Yep, the southern edge. Yep, so all along there, mark it there, that's the edge. This is what we call our Emerald Park. The Emerald Necklace is what we call the whole thing, and then it has parks. It's just our label, guys.
Hey, I'm writing it down.
Okay, it's the Emerald Park, part of the Emerald Necklace, the Emerald Park, and it goes so that the southern bottom of that is all the way along that open space, all the way across to following Roberts Road. So you just follow the line. Take your line where you stopped at the open space. No, other side at the western edge. Follow along the bottom of the open space. That's right. Keep going. Keep going. Nope. Now come back. Open space. We're capturing open space here.
Right here, still, right?
Oh, yep, follow. And then someplace along there, it would be, I think we have, I don't remember where we put the line. But then, so when you get to the northern part, we only have this northern part left up here. Our idea would that be south of the schools, there'd be about a 60, 70 acre open recreation site. So just put a green block in south of the schools. That's about the same size as your purple one there. That's about 60, 70 acres.
Okay.
Where, yeah. And we're hoping what would happen is that the active park that's currently proposed for Proctor and Thomasville, but is having a lot of problems being put in there because of the land management that goes on around there. Plus it's in the middle of nowhere. We as citizens, we don't have any power to make this happen, but as citizens, we would like to see that moved to this location or somewhere near it. So it's in direct contact with the schools.
And being more central.
Right, and being, yeah, and then as you said, as you drew there, and then another strip of greenway or something that would allow a connection all the way across. So our Emerald Park and our Emerald Greenway system has a large park. It has the Canopy Road buffers. It has a buffer around Buckhead, and then it has the active recreational park. And to a comment made earlier by Robert Volpe, we hadn't gotten this far with it, but would include some of this other open space that has to be set aside because it's wetlands and water in some ways to connect it to the rest of this. So there wouldn't just be the encircling trail, but there'd be trails within it too.
Mm-hmm.
So Kate, that in a nutshell, it's a very audacious proposal, but this is 4,800 acres of land. And especially in the Northeast, it's some of the, I've been on the land because I helped someone chase down a horse that got loose. Anyways, it's really, I know that, and from on the other side of Miccosukee, it's really nice red oak upland forest, which is a relatively rare intact habitat around here because it's what we cut down all the time to live in. And I know that the landowners have kept this in marvelous shape. It's a really beautiful forest.
Cool. And Pam, I was just going to add to your comment. I think, I think y'all talked about someone threw out 100 feet somewhere along there. And I think that's the current distance right now. It's 100 feet from the center line is a requirement for Canopy Road protection. And also, I can't remember what page it was on. Is it maybe page 102 or something like that in our Greenways Master Plan? It calls for 75 to 150 foot.
Can you guys hear me now?
basically greenway,
Yes.
swath, basically kind of around the perimeter.
Can you hear me?
Based on,
Yes.
Sorry, guys, we're having highly technical issues over here at the Hall Reserve.
This is Jerry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. I was listening to you talk and concur with everything that Pam just said, and I was listening to you talk about the width of the quote unquote greenway. And I just, I think we want to advocate for the widest greenway possible. I know there's no technical definition, but if we're going to really have a greenway that protects and allows for the travel of animals and that sort of thing, the wider the better. And it just is extremely important that we work with wildlife experts to try to design those features so that we can make sure that they're functional.
okay.
Yeah, I think there would have to be some use of the open space and wetlands that are in there also as corridors, but we don't, outside of Jerry, we're not really, the rest of us in Keep It Real really aren't experts at trying to figure out how to establish this stuff. And I guess there's also a statement, you guys keep mentioning a permanent easement for stormwater. I think that must come off of Centerville Road, the crossing Centerville Road. Can you guys indicate where that is on the map? Do you know where that is, Floyd or Devin?
I do not. Does anybody else? I'd be happy to mark it if someone can direct me.
Gary, do you know where that's at by chance?
Yeah, it comes out at Centerville Road, south of the, right there, north of where your finger is, Jeremy. Right in there, through that drainage system, through that wetland system.
Through that so it's that wetland system that is where the permanent stormwater easement is, Gary?
It's a flowway easement that the city condemned through the property. That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, because when they did that work on the Clarn Estates, I assume you guys were these recipients of all that water, right?
Yeah. So that easement goes all the way to Miccosukee?
It does.
Do you know how
I don't know.
it is?
Not without looking back. It basically covers most of that where Jeremy's got dots, but I don't think it sustains that width all the way through. But basically where he's putting the dots present.
Okay.
All right, we'll check for width.
Yeah. It may only go to Dove Pond or something. I don't know.
Dove Pond's way down here.
Oh, Dove Pond's over there. Never mind. Whatever that is.
Yeah, Dove Pond's over here.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the land infill map right now, and I see the easement. It's generally where Jeremy drew it.
Mindy, can you give an idea about how wide that is?
It varies a lot. It kind of follows the contours of the wetland area that we're looking at. Perfect. But it's highly variable, yeah.
I was asking Tech to look at the same thing, so thanks, Mindy. I appreciate you doing that.
Sorry again. I know that that y'all did get some comments and offers of technical assistance from the Fish and Wildlife Commission. Can you just explain to us what your work will be to address those and work with them?
Alrighty, I'm going to go to you on that one. I know you've been working with Fish and Wildlife.
Yeah, they just kind of noted that there are some potential for listed species out in this area. When I had a phone call with them, they'd kind of indicated that they had some maps and data that they could share. When they sent the technical comment, it didn't include that. And so I've reached back out to see if I could get that information. I haven't heard back yet. So I think a lot of those kind of just depend on what the data that they can provide actually includes.
Okay.
I wanted to go and see if Laura had any questions. Laura, I can't see you because there's no video there, but I just wanted to see if there's anything that you had or if you want to jump in on this. You'd have to unmute yourself if you want to speak.
No, fine. You know, I talked quite a bit in the first one, and I'm here mostly to listen to your responses today. And I'll let you know if I'm something else I want to say. I appreciate it.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Laura.
Mhm.
Gary, this is your first one as well. Just wanted to throw it out to you if there's anything that you wanted to say or just why you're here, anything like that, just so everyone kind of got an idea.
No, sure. Most of the people on this call know me. I appreciate it, Devin. I'm the landowner's attorney, so I'm listening. I'm happy to answer questions. Pam, I saw yesterday the proposal that you verbally outlined, and we're looking at it. You know, I understand. At least I think I understand, without having spoken to you or any of the Jeff or any of the other folks that Keep It Rural, the thought processes behind it. I just haven't digested all of it yet. And I mean, ultimately, I'll say this in reaction to it. I think my client is receptive to the concept of that regional park for the reasons you noted. I don't know what the proper size of it is up below the Roberts and Munford School area. You know, it's, let's just say 50 acres for sake of using an easy number. And I think that's somewhere consistent, maybe even bigger than what they had envisioned up off of Roberts Road. I'm sorry, off of even further north up by Childs High School, north of there, off of Proctor Road. The rest of the expansion of the Greenway, it may make sense to make that consistent, at least with the buffering requirements that are imposed by code anyway, to protect those canopy roads. Obviously, the larger of area you start to take, particularly uplands, you know, becomes a little bit more impactful, obviously, on the property overall, and we'd have to consider that. And, you know, ultimately, the deal on that Greenway wasn't that my client was providing that land for free. So much of this is handicapped by the you know, the more property involved, the more money it costs to acquire that property for those purposes. And you know, that's blueprint and ultimately the city and the county dollars that are being used for that purpose. So there are financial limitations, I'm assuming. I don't speak for those entities on, you know, the capacity of them to acquire land for green space. And those considerations certainly are relevant, I think, as we contemplate the size of these natural features. You know, I think in a reactive way to what I've seen from your proposal, Pam, the concept of using those flowway wetland systems through the property ultimately to have connectivity to a trail system makes perfect sense. And if Gary Hunter were a developer, obviously I'm not, I'm a developer's lawyer and landowner's lawyer. And I do that work, as you all know, all over Florida. And I see all kinds of iterations of these sort of large area plans. It certainly seems logical to use those environmental features in a way that is complementary to what's happening on the perimeter of the property and the area generally, so that it would make the area more user friendly, both to the folks who live there and to the citizens around it generally. So that makes sense to me. I don't know how you do that necessarily at a high level planning stage. Which is what this comp plan amendment is intended, master plan, I think, is intended to be. But I mean, I do think there are probably appropriate ways to wordsmith that in policies that encourage and ultimately direct that sort of connectivity when the land does get developed.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate you chiming in. Pam, I think we got to unmute you.
Okay, thanks, Gary. We haven't really thought our way through how to implement all of it. I mean, because we're trying to, as Rick Miner said yesterday, you know, that sweet spot between what we think at the moment is too vague of a master plan, but also recognizing that objective 1.1 in the comp plan is probably 13.1, the heel and toe stuff is too detailed. And we're more interested in making sure that we get direction for the PUDs for these arch-wide systems, in which the greenways is very important. And whether that comes, sometimes, you know, every PUD has to have open space, and there's a prioritizing of open space. I mean, maybe in that way, particularly along the canopy roads, they have to do the 100-foot setback, but we're looking for additional space. As a forest ecologist, I don't think a canopy of large oaks can be maintained in 70 feet effectively on the side of the road. So I'm looking for greater buffer space there, and also space to put a trail. That maybe we can incorporate that as in the priorities of how PUD set aside open space, so that it becomes part of the PUD process and not as a upfront designation of land. But I don't know. I mean, those are sort of the ideas. That the big chunk of the Emerald Park, I recognize. I recognize how audacious that is. Really, I mean, it's really a relatively uncommon forest type that remains intact throughout Leon County. And I don't, at least from what I can tell from talking to the Tall Timbers folks, there's really, outside of the pine, the longleaf pine, which has really been decimated, this forest type is also very rare because so many of us live in it. So yeah, I mean, it's a proposal, it's out there. I'd like to find a way to wordsmith it into at least being prioritized in the master plan, and then to have discussions with Blueprint and the powers that be about how we could implement that in a, you know, completely or some close fashion to that. And I'm really glad to hear you guys are thinking about moving that active park, because it just doesn't make sense to have it the place where no kid can get to. I mean, if it's just down the schools, you know.
Yeah, I mean, from a landowner standpoint, I mean, it's not offensive for that park to be there. And from somebody that lives in the northeast part of the community, like most of the folks on this call, you know, my children are grown and no longer attending parks like maybe most of us on this call. But the logic of it certainly is obvious.
Mike, hadn't heard from you this morning. You want to jump in, Mike, with anything?
Yeah, you know, one thing that I've just wondered about, and I think I've mentioned this before, is that it seems like, Devin, that, you know, I don't know if, you know, we see this, I'm looking at my map at home that I have of the same thing, and everything looks green on all the barriers, but I just wonder if there's been any kind of surveilling of that to see how you know, every part of the plantation is going to be different as far as how much foliage is there. I know that when the canopy was being built, I talked to Stan Rosenthal, and there were some trees that were actually cut down that were on that 100-foot canopy protected, and they had to pay a fine. But I'm concerned about just protecting that as things are being developed, and I'd like to. There may be other places to have the continuity where there needs to be things planted, and I want to iterate, because I think I've said it before, but I think that's one of the important things about getting a good idea how thick it is and what's there, and what could be done to make it not just a concept but a plan. And so there may be some planning that needs to be done, and it be on the front end than the back end. I mean, since this is an integral part of the entire project, I would think that would be something that should be settled ahead of time. And the other thing would be the money for this. I realize it's asking a lot for them to donate, but I would like to see a reasonable cost for this per acre, rather than the per acre price that'll be after, you know, the city and the county are doing a lot to have all this approved. That's the area that's not planned on being built on anyway. So, you know, a more, you know, price that would be, I think that the last one, it was done 20 years ago, was about $7,000 or $8,000 per acre. They got paid for what they donated, but not really a donation. They sold to the state a bigger greenway built. So those are things I think are important to settle up front, is how much is it going to cost per acre to do this, and also the plan underway and the planting underway and the protection of that, so that a developer doesn't do what the canopy guy did and on trees that are going to take years and years to replace. That would be my feedback.
So I think I'm hearing 3 big points there, Mike, and just correct me on this, but the first is, has there been a survey done of basically the natural features that are on the site or of the land and the land type? Then what will we do to protect the canopy roads? Because you saw that there was some trees that were removed from a canopy road protection zone. And then what would be the cost that the developer would be or the landowner would be seeking for the land, or what would we be able to pay for the land if that was to be sold for a park? That sum it up pretty well? Okay. Mindy, do you have anything that you can mention about the trees in the protection zone and how those are protected and what they could or couldn't do inside that canopy road protection zone?
Basically, there is no development impact of any kind allowed inside the canopy protection zone. So that means all the trees are protected, all the even underbrush is protected. They can do improvements in that area with a vegetation management plan. So for example, if there were invasive species or whatnot, they could remove those and replant with a vegetation management plan that was approved by the city. We do have a tree inventory for the canopy roads. They collected it in 2014, I believe, and they collected trees 12 inches in diameter and up. So we do have some information on what's out there as far as tree cover, but it's a little bit dated at this point.
Is there a link to that, Mindy, anywhere that they can go online to find that?
It's available if you add data to the land information map, but I'm looking for it right now and I only see the city portion. So I probably have to contact GIS and see where that information is stored.
Okay, if you happen to be able to find that, can we get that to Artie just to be able to send out?
Will do.
Okay, awesome. And then Gary, I'm going to jump to you real quick on one of the other questions. I see you, Jerry. I'll come right back to you. Gary, do you know if there's been a survey done of the property at this point?
Sorry, Devin, I was muted.
No problem.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
When you say survey, you mean like a survey of the boundaries or a natural feature survey?
Boundaries. I know we haven't done a natural features yet. We've all been talking about that, but has there been any type of land survey or anything done at this point?
I mean, historically, yes. I'm not sure how recent that is my best answer for you right now. I've not seen one that's been, and I've been representing this family for a long time. At least in the last decade, I'm not familiar with a survey.
Okay. Thanks, Gary. I just wanted everyone to be able just to hear if there was one or not. And then Mike, on the other question that you had about the cost of land, I think that's something we'll have to look back into for you, because I don't think any of us had the ability to give you that number today or even have any insight on what that number would be. But that's something I know Artie's noted.
It's not. You can talk.
And I'd like us to all sort of think about other ways of doing it than pure purchase or donation on the landowner's part. I mean, that's why I was thinking about the priority open space requirements. I do know that in the canopy PUD, I think I read it there, was that there is a prioritization of what goes into their open space. And I'd like to have more discussion of understanding how much open space is required by a PUD. I know that's sort of complicated, but I wouldn't mind learning that better. And that one of the priorities was to extend the buffer of the canopy road, because I really don't think those trees survive well at keeping a good healthy canopy really requires a mixed understory of different sizes, and it's hard to accomplish that in what is effectively 50 or 60 feet of actual forest once you get from the center of the road and up the bank. But they chose not to do that. So I'm suggesting that this be not much of a choice when a developer comes in, but this is a required area of set aside. So also that doesn't come off the landowner's back on this, and to have it recognized that there would be a blueprint trail that goes through that, right? That's part of the Northeast Gateway. So it's going to be an amenity. It's not a cost to the developer to end up with green space with a trail through it. This creates much greater value to the residential development there.
You can go look here.
Oh, I keep forgetting where my camera is.
Your camera.
So anyways, I saw to Mike's point about where the money would come from. I think we ought to be a little creative and think about other ways in which it would come from. And especially for that Emerald Park, part of the Emerald Necklace is that I think it's about 300 acres. That is the upland red oak forest, and about, this was my best estimates, Floyd. And then
Yeah, this whole area here is about 800 to 900 acres, this whole area.
Yeah.
So 300 is probably a good estimate for this.
Right, right. And then the other part was open space, floodplain, and set-asides. And I still don't know how much of the open space and floodplain would end up being utilized for stormwater, particularly for regional stormwater. So,
Jerry wanted to jump in on the conversation as well. I want to give Jerry a chance to jump in there.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you. I was just gonna observe that these upland areas widening this is not my area of expertise, but widening those buffer areas in the area that you were just talking about and along the existing canopy, the greenway on Miccosukee, etc. I've seen gopher tortoises in that area. And so I would assume in these upland areas, given the type of habitat that is there, that's something that the city and subsequent developers will have to deal with. And going ahead and identifying those as conservation areas for those species would be a smart thing to do, because it will make the subsequent permitting and development of those properties easier if people have thought about that ahead of time. So just a note that from an ease of permitting and development, looking at that holistically with an eye to layering that protection with these recreational amenities that, you know, certainly benefit all of us and the subsequent folks that move there, makes the land more valuable, makes the to market to sell, and for the subsequent home buyers to own. I think there's just multiple benefits of looking at these things holistically.
Great, thanks, Jerry. And I think a lot of those conversations too, that we're hearing that over and over again. So it's good for us to be able to get that data and bring it into the conversation. And it's nice to hear that you guys are kind of all on the same page with that. Mike, let me come back to you in just a second. I want to ask Kate if she has anything to add or anything right now.
I just for perspective on this, 1998 was when we purchased the original Greenway, and it was $4 million for 500 acres, so it's about $8,000 an acre. And so I'm sure the numbers today for any land that would need to be purchased from the current owner, any developer, would be significantly more than that per acre. And, you know, I think it's good to look at it the way that you are holistically, but also keeping in mind that, you know, the property owners ultimately do have a say in what land they're interested in selling versus developing, you know, and that's going to have to be negotiated. So I'm not sure we can get everything we want and need for the community, you know, without having to shell out some money. So
absolutely, we're shelling out a damper
in it, but yeah, I think it could be, we could end up with a part, you know, having to purchase some amount of land for a park or greenway areas in the future, and so we should be trying to kind of figure out how that would happen now, how that would be funded.
Agreed.
And thanks for that information too. That's good to know those prices from back then. I think Floyd, I think you wrote that down, right?
Yep, right here.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Kate. Mike, you want to go ahead? I know you had another question.
I just want to make sure, I mean, I know this is all just conceptual at this point, but I remember already when I first, Sarah, my wife and I came to the rollout of this, there was a couple that lived in those houses that are at the top of the border there. We were just talking about, the jury was talking about development. Yeah. And I would want to make sure that we include that as buffer as well, or trail, because I remember there was a young couple there that night, Artie, you may or may not remember, who lived right at they owned 5 acres right at the border of the, they were kind of concerned. So I would hope that that would continue to be a part of the plan as well. If we had the greenway going across the lower part there of that wetland area, that there would still be a buffer at the top of this. You know what I'm talking about? You were pointing to it a minute ago, Floyd, I believe. Not that area. I'm talking about up road on Robertson Crump Road, I believe it is.
Where there's the 90-degree angle.
Yeah, where there's a 90-degree angle and all that. Yeah, right there where your finger is, that whole area.
Okay.
But that would still be green. They're either a trail or a pretty good sized buffer.
Artie, do you have any comment on that?
No, I remember the couple well, and you know, I think kind of the at least the concept shown here, there would be the trail that's there, and I think we can look at anything else that's planned in other buffers. I will just note that, and this isn't specific to Welaunee, but this is kind of planning in general. Anytime we do any sort of planning, there's always trade-offs, and I think it's always good to acknowledge that. The more things you set aside for other things, the more expensive it gets to do construction and development, which is sometimes the trade-off you have to make when you talk about things like affordable housing or housing prices and stuff. When you talk about infrastructure and then wanting to have certain number of units to kind of offset the cost of the infrastructure through property taxes and things like that, that's a trade-off you get with kind of where you the development and the size of it. And so I'm not saying that there's a right or wrong answer, just kind of acknowledging that, every decision we make impacts something else. And so as we go through this, we'll have to look at those trade-offs and kind of make decisions. And that'll probably be largely what we talk about in the second round, or the in-person charrettes, is kind of consolidating everything we hear and then having to have the conversations about what trade-offs get made.
I got Jerry and Scott both wanting to make a comment. Jerry raised her hand first. Jerry, then I'll come back to you, Scott.
I beat you to the buzzer, Scott. Just noting that I think we have somebody on the line from Trust for Public Land. There's multiple other sources of assistance to the city that could acquire and develop these lands for the public park functions that we're talking about in the greenways. BIRDAP, LWCF, Florida Communities Trust, et cetera, and it's not like there aren't resources out there to help.
Scott, I guess I got beat to the buzzer, but I would also point out, and I realize, Artie, we're talking trade-offs in development between set-asides and land and development and cost, but a lot of these set-asides we're talking about, parks, green space, etc., actually increase the value too. So the regional stormwater ponds so they don't have to dedicate each part of the PUD to that. So a lot of this infrastructure does affect the price of the land that remains. And I agree with you, but I'm not sure that the sign of that change is as clear, that it's not always a negative, that they have to take away from the value of the land, that they have to then raise the price. But I think it increases it. So I don't think it's as clear cut as you presented it, but the trade-off is certainly there.
All valid concerns and points. I have Laura as well that has been waiting. Laura, I want to go ahead and let you get in on the conversation.
Well, just, one of the things you can probably see from the plan that Keep It Rural submitted, that you all have been referring to, and from the one other shred I was on, which was the first one, is that it seems to make a lot of sense that things that will affect every PUD, however many there are, that will cross PUD boundaries, like stormwater, like greenways, like parks and trails, should be clear to any developer before they begin. So they need to be in the master plan, so that it doesn't get shoved down from one PUD to the next, so that it's already very clear what portion of the land that you buy to develop has already been designated for these certain features. That's the way you get a a consistent, holistic development on this huge piece of property. And I think that was Scott, that's what Scott was just saying. I'm just reiterating it in my own words. Right, Scott?
What you said, you beautiful. Yes, 100%.
And I think that's been noted in every meeting so far. I think that's one of the things that's come up pretty much every time. Pam's nodding her head. I think she agrees with that.
Mhm.
Pam, I'm going to come right back to you. I want to see if Robert has anything. We haven't heard from Robert yet. Usually he at least gives us at least something. I wanted to see if Robert has anything to add or if he just wants to speak up.
Thank you, Devin. Honestly, I don't have anything to add today. I think it's been a good conversation, and the questions that were asked about the landowners, Gary was obviously here to answer those. So thank you for acknowledging me, but I don't have anything to add to this conversation today.
Thanks, Robert. We appreciate you being here. Pam, coming back to you.
Okay, so guys, I want to
See you,
move
Mike.
the other half of this discussion that we just talked.
You're muted.
Oh.
There you go. You're good. You're good. You're good.
Okay, so what I want to do now is, we don't have much time left, but and I know this isn't Keep It World's Ballywick, but I've done some thinking about this. Is everyone hearing you?
Now we do. You're good now.
We can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, we ought to know what we're doing over here, but we're not very good at it. I'm echoing. Yeah.
Can we use Scott's mic?
We're trying. Are we okay now?
That's the best.
Okay, don't move. So let's talk about the development densities and forms of development on the developable land, and let's leave the mixed use out right now, because I that's something I really don't know how to wrap my head around, and particularly the commercial part. I'm hoping mixed use means also some residential. So outside of the big purple thing along I-10, we can deal with the neighborhoods, and you had 3 layers. You had town.
Wait, are you muted?
Neighborhood, and I can't remember what the 3rd layer was. But to the point of overall density, because I mean, this is going to matter. This is going to how you're going to make it work, is to have set-asides, because we have to set aside things for floodplains, and set-asides because it makes the whole place better to live. So I really want to understand, Artie, why you have different colors for land use. I mean, I can appreciate why it's a different color up in the Northeast, but let's just say we managed to find some way to set aside most of that land, so that wetlands and upper Northeast corner is park. So is there any reason why there's really a large density differences elsewhere, and why there isn't at this possible intersection on the east side another purple box that's some sort of mixed use? I can't remember your different layers. You have towns and neighborhood centers. But I mean, why don't we have much more uniform density throughout, or at least the allowance of that? And I think there's 2 things here: greater density throughout and greater diversity of housing types as being required, not an option, because we don't want to end up with everything single family detached, because that in itself makes it an expensive community, which we're trying to avoid here. We're trying to make this a community that many people in Tallahassee could live in. And then the other thing is this trade-off, because I know a little bit about the state law for affordable housing, but I'm not necessarily talking about affordable housing, but inclusionary housing, things that are below the current market point at Canopy, for instance, which is $320,000, which is for our community a rather expensive home. Ways in which, so this is a bit of a game here. If you have to be able to give the developer greater density when they're willing to do more diversity of lower priced housing. So how about if there's a zoning allowance that's like 6 to 8 units per acre everywhere, so that when there's particular places that they would think that they can profitably put in a greater diversity of housing type, and therefore some variety of costs, allow that area to go up to 10 units per acre. So it's much more, instead of, I don't know, what do you have now? You have like 10 and 6 for these 2 different colors, 10 on the tan side and 6 on the orange side. Make everything 6, and then have the capacity to move to 8 to 10 based on whether or not there's some real effort of doing multi-priced housing. Even though I would rather just plain require it, because that's the only way we get a community that's really good is when a diversity of people can live there. But
Yeah.
and then the addition would be some sort of cluster housing so that we can, as we come along and do better natural features understanding as, so we can protect from other areas that might show up. We don't really know on this map how uniform that is.
Yeah, just for reference and because of the question, and I'm not saying that it needs to be this way moving forward, just kind of answering the question was, why the difference? Initially, we were looking at higher density on the western portion versus on the eastern portion. I think Floyd was kind of waving over the different areas, but partly, well, a couple of different reasons. One, we were looking at on the western portion, you already have Killarn and some of that development that's a little bit higher density than what you see on the eastern portion of Welaunee, kind of like the couple that we mentioned earlier that live up in that bend area. Also, we're looking at the transportation network. We'd really like the Welaunee Boulevard intersection with I-10 and kind of those other connections to hold more traffic than the roadways that intersect Miccosukee Road. We'd like to keep those intersections smaller. And one of the ways we can do that is to have generally lower density out on the western portion, so you don't have as much traffic put on those roads as you would on the eastern portion. We're also looking at, because of the kind of the nature of the area that's on the western portion, focusing more on conservation subdivisions versus on the eastern portion. It would be less clustered, less conservation subdivision, and more just like housing development. I do like the idea of like a smaller mixed use area at that intersection to serve that area. It would help with that 20% internal capture by having that kind of thing, and that's something that I think we'll definitely look at. I know Floyd has a little cutout of something that is like an example of a conservation subdivision, so we can kind of see how that looks when it's fit out there. I do think we'll need to, run some numbers and see what those calculations are, but if those numbers are, appropriate, what we're proposing now, or if they need to be just slightly. But I think that's just kind of the initial thought of what we were looking at originally when we put those colors on the map. Is trying to match what's surrounding the area, the east side versus the west side, and then the transportation network and how much traffic is generated for which roadways.
Just to pause this for a second, we are at 11:30, but we did get started as usual about 10 minutes late with getting everybody on. So is everybody okay going to 11:40 and kind of wrapping up? Okay, awesome. Artie, with that, did you want Floyd to kind of show that cutout on the map?
I mean, I think he put it on the map for reference. So if there's questions, it can come up. But just kind of.
I was looking at the small square, so it's harder for me to see it. Sorry. I know Mike had something he was waiting to get out on the table as well.
Well, I was just, we were mainly talking about the greenways and parks and stuff earlier. So what we've talked about it, or I've brought up a couple of times with Keep It Rural. And since Gary's here today, maybe he could go back to the landowners. I would like to see, a couple, maybe 2 or 3 of our reps and maybe somebody from Tall Timbers and definitely Mindy and some other folks. Maybe we could have a field trip to actually go on the land and look at some of these areas that we're talking about, so we could visualize it better and get a better idea of, and maybe the greenway itself in certain parts, But I'm just throwing that out there as an idea that maybe that would be, and of course, whoever from the city that y'all thought would be beneficial to do that.
I vote yes.
Gary, not to put you on the spot, you are muted. Is that something that would be amenable at some point, or is that something you just have to discuss with the landowner?
Yeah, but I better not plan a field trip on their property without talking to them.
Assumed.
There you go. That sounds like fun.
But that said, I enjoy going myself, so I will talk to them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Anybody else have anything you want to bring up? We have about 5 minutes left, and just any last minute stuff or anything that you want to bring up you haven't heard yet.
Can I ask about what's going to happen in the heel? Because the sort of idea that along Miccosukee, there's not much development, partly because there's a greenway there. It's also the heel. I mean,
Hold on one second, Pam. I think Jerry was jumping in to say something.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Pam.
So I mean, part of what's hard about doing this arch is we're sort of pretending the heel and toe don't exist. I mean, the toe a little bit because we've got that big purple mixed area. But I mean, the heel is at the moment it's heavily forested, but it's had a plan for it, a master plan for it, sitting there with the idea that it would be like all built out by now. I mean, I know the dates in the comp plan never worked because there was this thing called a recession in the middle. But I find it hard for us to think so heavily and strongly about the arch when we're not dealing with the heel. And of course, the heel connects all the way back down to another I-10 interchange. And I'm just concerned that these aren't more linked together and that there's not more realism about what's going to happen in the heel. Instead of just saying, well, the heel gets developed after the arch, when of course the heel is older and has been inside the USA for much longer, that we have these two interstate interchanges, one which has been sitting there for a while and is not developing very well, but somehow we think this I-10 interchange at between Miccosukee and Centerville is going to be a real hot spot for development. I don't understand how we link these three together. They need to the toe, the heel, and the arch need to be linked. And I think there needs to be something explicit, perhaps in the phasing process. I'm not quite sure where it would go in the master plan about not doing development in the orange area until something manifests itself in the heel.
Artie, do you know enough about that to be able to speak on it?
Honestly, no. MJ might be able to speak about the PUDs and the status and the kind of the phasing between the toe, heel, and arch. But that's kind of a level that's a little bit more detailed than what I usually get at.
MJ, is there anything that you have on that or any information you can provide?
No, I mean, I've only dealt with the toe. I've heard nothing about the arch or any interest in developing it, but I know that, the toe is pretty integrated, the two PUDs that are in the toe, but that's the only thing I'm familiar with at this point.
Is the city PUD on the market?
Not that I'm aware. I don't know what's going on. It's just sitting there.
Okay.
Well, okay, so there, to my point, it's just sitting there and we're talking about building on 4,800 acres north, further outside. I think the master plan for the arch has to incorporate the development range and capacities and dating of the heel and the toe. Even if we build this road all the way through, are we just going to start developing in the arch along the road and ignore the heel and all the rest of this? And how do we connect what's going on in the arch to the heel?
Jerry's really excited. She has something to say.
Well, no, I'm not trying to get the last word or anything, but I think this is a good example of what Laura talked about earlier, is that, that holistic looking at these things. And here's an example of where we're not doing that. And these things have become disconnected, and it's, just I think the way that any of us want this to go forward.
Laura, I noticed that you unmuted yourself too. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Oh, I did that. Sorry, I forgot to remute myself. That was just when I was saying I'll go on the field trip.
I just wanted to make sure that we had, if there was something you wanted to say, that we captured it.
No, that was it. Thank you.
What Jerry said, it's no development's an island. I mean, they're all part of the whole here. And to sort of draw a line and say we're only going to consider that within that little line there, and what's on the other side doesn't exist or is a void, is not going to lead to a better community.
In fairness to the planning effort, this is Gary with a little bit of a historical perspective on that, if I may. Remember, the heel and the toe have had master plans put upon them. And in fact, many of the people on this phone call participated in those processes. And in this same effort that we're engaged in right now related to the arch, when that effort was occurring on those two parcels.
Mhm.
The fact that the heel hasn't developed yet is, I think, reflective of the conversation, Pam, I know you and I have had offline, not in group context, and some of which online, it is probably equally applicable to the arch, which is these are large vision, long-term vision plans on big pieces of property that will occur over time. There's no plan to develop the arch now. In fact, my clients live there. I've told probably everybody on this phone call that. But there's a roadway network being planned through their property. And so in a planning context, and Artie and his team are far more expert at this than Gary Hunter is, but I've seen it done all over Florida. And fortunately, we've got an opportunity to do it here. When you're planning big transportation networks, it makes sense to plan the lands around it too. Not develop them, plan them. And so, Pam, I mean, I think, you know, I'm being candid when I say this, and I know my clients would say this if they were here speaking. They'd love for someone to buy the heel and develop it tomorrow. That hasn't happened yet. And you know, I think it probably logically makes sense that that would be the parcel that someone comes and buys a portion of or all of and proceeds to develop consistent with the work that Rick Carney has done out with his project around 90 and I-10, and then develop the heel long before anything happens on the arch. Remember, the Gateway project isn't being constructed yet. Obviously, there's no interchange at I-10 yet. And so I think when those things do happen, when the Gateway project develops and when there's an interchange, assuming FDOT and the federal DOT approve that, there probably will be some development at some point around that interchange. But I can tell you my client hopes that long before that, there's been a development done on the heel, and clearly that development's got to be consistent with the master plan that we've all participated in putting in place over that property. And I would hope that this master plan for the arch is complementary to what's been done at the toe and the heel. And as we all mature and see these things happen over time, that we can do the arch better to the extent there's room for improvement than what was done 10 and 15 years ago with the toe and the heel. And I think that's what this conversation is attempting to do. And I say all that sincerely, but it's not fair to suggest that they haven't been contemplated in holistically, because they really have. And what got delayed was the arch. But now the arch is coming into the picture.
So what I was saying of they need to be considered holistically was not that the heel or the toe weren't holistically, but now they need to be tied into the whole of the arch.
Right.
And so their effect on the arch, and that's new, has nothing to do really with the past. It's because we're now considering the arch, we need to consider everything around it. And the two elephants in the room, to mix a metaphor, are really the toe and the heel. That was all.
This really is at the planning stage, and the fact that that road is planned to be built within 5 years. So that road is a new development coming fast, and it's coming much faster than what's ever happened in the heel. So I mean, we're at the planning stage, and that's exactly what I think should be happening. And there should be reintegration of the toe and the heel with the arch now that the arch is being contemplated to be developed. If the road is built in 5 years, there's development coming most likely in 5 years. And that's all. Is when I look at the plans for the toe and the heel, I mean, I see lots of problems with them. I mean, there's way too much detail in it. It's too hard to make changes because of all the detail. It's the wrong sort of type of detail. You know, it's not the things that we're trying to capture in the arch are the things that cross PUDs and are fundamental to the entire functioning of the whole area. And I don't see that having been a big part of the toe and the heel discussion. It was much more you know, drawing circles and putting densities in. And I think that was unfortunately the planning time, the ideas at that time. And now I think we have a better grasp of trying to do it truly holistically and ecosystem based, and then the human use of those ecosystems. So I know we can't really in this master plan fix the heel, but I think we ought to speak to the heel in the master plan, the heel and toe in this master plan, and then have the chance to go back and really make the heel master plan better, so it doesn't create some of the problems of having to constantly rewrite stuff because there's too much detail in it, and then not enough direction for the PUDs for some of these broader heel-wide and arch-wide things. So after the stormwater is going to keep coming across the boundaries, it's not going to pay any attention to the taller boundaries.
So we are at our time. We're 11:44, but I did have Mike that was wanting to ask one question. So I do want to come back to Mike really quickly and let him ask that question because he was there.
Well, you know, I 2 points, I guess. One was that, you know, yesterday I was reminding everyone because Southwood kept coming up as an example of a good plan, but that was a plan that was holistic because it was one developer. I think what was got our, you know, us pretty stirred up, and not just keep it rural, but many people in this city and the county, is that the master plan that was being developed originally for the tow by Joel Embry and I can't remember the other guy's name, Edmonds, I think it was, that was the owner. Once he sold it, the master plan, no matter what the city had planned, I don't think that was what the plan was. From everything I've talked to originally with people that were on the citizens committee for the canopy at that time, but and what we've seen is a disrespect for the natural resources, the way that has been developed. And what we're trying to do is to learn from them, and we want y'all to help us do too, is to put some teeth into the master plan. And I think that's what Laura was talking about, that these things that are in the plan that are held sacred, the developer knows that. They're off limits. They're things that they have to respect, and they can't just have a tree bank to pay for the egregious errors that they've made. It's got to be done like I said yesterday, with grace and something that's going to be, the city is going to be proud of, and not, you know, I don't think that that we're in that place right now. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just trying to be real. Most people I know, when they drive through the canopy, are aghast at what they've seen, and what they see is clear cutting of trees. They see leveling of land, and they see degradation. And it's not an improvement. It should be something. It reflects who we are as Tallahasseans and residents of this county. And unfortunately, the name doesn't do it any service at all either, as far as being in the good graces of the city and the county citizens. So I'm sorry to get on a soapbox here at the end, but I just want to keep raising that consciousness that our hearts are in. I do not think that I will be here on the planet when this is finally developed, but I do care about what's going on in this county and the city, and there's a lot of people like us that feel. Right.
Thanks, Mike. We appreciate the comments on that too, and just, you know, kind of let everyone know where you're coming from. Before we close this out, I do want to see if Commissioner Minor has anything that he wants to say. I know he's kind of chimed in, and this one he was kind of quiet on.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. I appreciate it. This has been a really good charrette. I mean, they've all been good. I think this is number 6, right? This has been a really good discussion on the greenways, and Gary and Robert, thank you again for being at this charrette. And Robert, I think, has been at every other one too. It's good from my standpoint to start to see. I mean, things are starting to reveal some common ground, some common consensus from different perspectives, and I see that as very encouraging. So really appreciate everything that Artie, Devin, everyone on your team are doing. You guys are doing a good job with these charrettes. I've been really happy, and from the people I've spoken with offline, it seems like they're very happy too. So the trick will be making sure that the feedback that Artie, you and Devin and your team have collected are presented to the two commissions in a way where we can actually start to make some decisions and see the results of the negotiations with Gary and Robert and the family. But I'm really encouraged by what we've seen so far. So thank you for everybody for participating. Appreciate it.
And once again, thanks to everybody for joining. Artie does have the second part of the charrette up on the same website where you registered for this, you can go do the survey that he has. If you haven't done it, please do it and share it with your friends so that way they can give us some feedback. And good seeing everyone again. And thanks for the new ones that came out.
Thanks, everyone.